This is the Art and Business of Writing podcast. Shawn Radcliffe is a freelance health and science writer, yoga teacher, and fiction writer. His work has appeared on Healthline.com, Men's Fitness, Science and Non-Duality, The Health Journal, and others. Formerly from Oregon, he's now living in Ontario, Canada, where he skis and hikes the lower elevations. His website is ShawnRadcliffe.com. Welcome on, Shawn.
Hi, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So expand on the bio a little bit. Tell us a little more about who you are, what you do, and how you do it.
Well, right now I am a freelance health and science writer, which covers quite a bit of stuff. I've written not just health and science, though. I've written a little bit about sports, technology. I do some business writing, but my main focus is on health and science related because that's pretty much where my background is.
Awesome. Now, tell us how you got your start into freelance writing.
I had worked for probably about 10 years at universities. I worked in a lab. I did some administrative work, some research administration, that kind of stuff. And there came a day that I just decided that I needed a change of pace. They were thinking about downsizing my position, so I decided to kind of get out before they let me go. And, writing was something I had been doing for a long time. So it sort of seemed natural that, that would be something I could do. And, the bonus was that I could work from home, which was something I'd always kind of wanted to do.
Now, did you transition out, kind of split your time until your income matched, or did you just decide, hey, I'm just going to just go for it?
In the beginning, I'm also a yoga teacher. So in the beginning, I went down to half time at the job I had, and I was doing half there and half yoga teaching. So that kind of gave me a little bit of transition time. And I didn't really start writing until I had stopped working at the university. So, I was still teaching yoga about 20 hours a week, I think. So, that kind of gave me a chance to transition into writing. And it gave me a little bit of a buffer because, when you start freelance writing, you don't always make as much money as you want in the beginning. So it's good to have that first off buffer.
Right. And I guess that brings me to my next question. With regards to freelancing, going into it, what did you know? And then looking back, what do you wish you had known?
I knew how to write, and that was pretty much all I knew how to do was writing. I had been writing for a long time. I used to work for a publisher. That was my first job out of college. So I had a lot of editing skills, a lot of, creating newsletters, that kind of stuff. But, the business side of freelancing, I really had no clue. How to submit queries, how to find jobs. That was kind of stumbling in the beginning. So I think it would have been nice if I had, figured that stuff out before I quit my job. But, that's not always how it turns out.
No, definitely not. So how did you learn, the whole process of submitting queries?
A lot of the freelance business side, I've read a lot of websites. There are some good freelancing websites. Writer's Digest has some good books on, how to write magazine articles, which, always includes submitting queries, responding to queries. And there's also a lot of, business-oriented stuff, invoicing, that kind of stuff that some of these books cover, some of the websites cover. So I did a lot of research. I still do research. I'm still learning stuff that I probably should have known a while ago.
Now, with regards to sending queries to editors, how did you go about the whole process? Once you realized, okay, I'm going to jump into freelancing, I'm going to start to submit my stories. Did you just email a bunch of magazines and online web sources, or did you have something that was more deliberate and systematic?
I tried to be a little more systematic. First was coming up with certain ideas that I thought might be good for articles. And then after that, it's a matter of finding publications, either websites or print publications that might be interested in your story. And, there's a lot of research. Some people just kind of send them out like they're, grape shot, kind of just a bunch out at once. But I think it's better if you kind of focus, what the publication wants. And I think that's a little more useful than just kind of hoping for the best.
Right. Now, what do you recommend for someone who may want to freelance when they start off? Do you recommend that they kind of niche in and write about things that they're really, really good at, or do you realize, or be more general and just kind of try to find a way to get their feet wet?
I think it depends. If you have a solid background in something, mine was health and science. I'd been doing science research for a long time, so I had a lot of background in that. So that was a natural fit for me. If you're into sports, if you do like frisbee golf or something like that, and it's something well, you can focus on that, and you can find publications that want your expertise, and they may be a little bit more forgiving if you're not the best writer in the world. But if you're a really good writer and you don't have one area that you want to specialize in, I think you can generalize. I think it's easier for you to show off your writing if you're a good writer. So yeah, I think it can go either way. I started as a generalist and then kind of switched to more focused writing.
Now, and when you're getting started as a freelancer and you're trying to come up with ideas to pitch or ideas to submit, do you have a method that you use?
I think for me, ideas have never been a problem. The problem for me is actually toning down the ideas. I could sit down and come up with a list of like 50 or so ideas that might work. I think the trick is matching those ideas to the publication. So I do a lot of brainstorming to get those ideas, but I also listen to people. I'll talk to people that I know, and they'll ask a question, and I'll be like, oh wait, that would be a great article if I could find out the answer to that question. Either something about cancer, or maybe it's just about eating better, or how do I start my garden? Any of those simple questions are always a good basis for ideas.
Oh, that's good. That's helpful to know. Now, with your pitching, what were your early pitches like, and then how did you figure out as you went along how to write them or craft them better to be noticed by editors?
I think most of my early pitches were kind of vague. They weren't as specific as they should have been. Over time, I got a little more focused, and I started, crafting them according to what most publications or most websites suggest for queries. You start off with an intro paragraph, and mine is pretty much what I might use if I were writing the article, and then a little bit more about this is what the article will cover, and these are my sources that I might use, and then a quick overview of this is why I could write that story. So I think basically 3 or 4 paragraphs. You get in there, you say what you need to say, and then you get out, and as focused as you can.
Right. Now, do you think there's value in taking the time to research and learn who the editor is that you're submitting it to, and then addressing that person by name and kind of understanding who they are in relation to how they publish in the magazine? You know what I mean?
I think if you know the editor's name, that's a step up for you. You can address the query to that editor. I don't know if you need to know the editor's background, what they like. I think the publication speaks for itself. And you'll notice that more publications are switching to a generic online form for queries. So you don't really have that opportunity to send your query directly to the editor. It just goes to an inbox, and probably a staff person starts reading them.
So with regards to the freelance process, and after you start to pitch, about how long do you think it takes to catch on, or how long did it take you to kind of start to catch on and start to see your job flow kind of steady out and grow, and then I guess your business start to build from it?
I think it probably took about a year, I would think, before I kind of hit my stride. In the beginning, I wasn't as methodical as I could have been. Even the smallest things, like my work schedule was kind of erratic. You go from being in an office where everything's pretty much this is what you do all day, to having so much free time that it's easy to kind of fall into bad habits. So I think after a year, I started to just getting a pattern. I would sit down in the morning, I would come up with queries, I would respond to queries or send them out, and then I would do some writing later in the day. So I think a year in, I was probably starting to see some progress in my income and in the response from queries.
Now, you brought up routines that you have, like getting up and sending queries. About how many queries do you send in a given, week or more, or whatever your system may be for sending those out?
For a while, I was trying to do one or two a week. Where I am right now, I have more work than I can keep up with sometimes. So I've kind of stopped sending out queries. Um, if I come up with an idea that I think is really good, I will send that one out. So down now I'm down to like maybe once a month, and that's mainly focused on things that I really like.
Okay, and then you also mentioned like the bad habits, like being at home, you're there, you're in your environment, which isn't like an office, where you've got people around you, so you're kind of more forced into work and being productive. Like, how do you manage yourself and your time when you're in the freelance environment?
I've I've decided that Monday through Friday is when I work, and I try to stick to that. I try not to work on weekends. It's really easy to kind of start the weekend thing. So in the morning, I actually leave the house. I work at home, but I actually leave the house every day, and I walk as if I'm going to walk to work, because that's what I used to do in Portland. Um, and just the walking away and coming back gives you the sense that, oh, now it's time to start working. But there's other stuff like laundry needs to be done. The house may be messy, so it's always a battle to not do those things while you're looking at them and just kind of say, well, I'm at work now. This can wait till later.
Right. Now, something else in the kind of in the freelance sphere is like facing like discouragement. When you're trying to get work and you're pushing out queries and things aren't coming in as fast as you wanted them to come in, and in the back of your mind, you're like, why did I do this? Should I just go back to full time, corporate job, or push through us all? How did you deal with that? If you dealt with that, or do you have advice for dealing with that?
That came up, and not just in the beginning. I had moved to Canada, and all of a sudden I wasn't teaching yoga anymore, so writing was my sole source of income. And I think right around then I started to panic a little bit that I didn't have enough work. And it's come up later. I had a lot of work going for a while, and then one publication kind of switched gears, and I wasn't writing for them anymore, and all of a sudden had to go find more work. So I think just be realistic. These bumps come along. You will hit these like low points where you feel like nothing's going right, and you just try to remember that there are times when a lot of things actually are going right. We tend to forget about them. So I think just, if you start to panic, just sit down and, look at what you're doing and just kind of reassess. Maybe you need to shift some things. Maybe you need to focus more time on queries. Maybe following up with editors is something you need to do right then. But I think you can always get through it. And you just need to give it a little bit of time sometimes.
Okay. And you brought up another good point of just the following up process. So from the time you submit a query, about how much time should be between that initial email and a follow up?
I think it depends on the publication. Some publications will say, don't follow up with us, never follow up with us. And I advise you not to do that, because the last thing you want to do is offend an editor. Some will say, 5 weeks. Some will say like 2 months. It depends on their publication cycle. I'm pretty bad with following up. It may go 5 weeks. I may wait till 2 months before I realize that, I haven't heard from this person. And usually when I follow up like that, it's because I want to use that idea in another story, and I just want to make sure that they're not running it with it before I try to approach another publication.
Okay. Oh, that's a good point too. When you have a story that you want to pitch, do you pitch it to multiple publications to see who's going to take it, or do you try to tailor just one publication, one story?
I generally do one publication, one story. Sometimes I will, if I have an idea that I've submitted to, like a more scientific audience, I will also take that idea and submit it to like a general publication where, it's going to be a lot shorter. It's going to be a lot of bullets. It's going to be a lot more slimmed down. And, in my mind, those are two different stories. It's the same topic, but two different stories. And you just have to be careful not to plagiarize yourself. One way to do that is to use different sources. Like if you're writing for a local publication, find local sources, and that kind of gives you a little fresh angle to that story.
Now, with regards to managing the freelance business side of it, is there like any kind of software? Do you use like a CRM to manage like, your workflow, your contacts? How do you manage that?
For tracking, I track my
Yeah.
time on every project. Like every story I write, I know how long it's taking me to write that. I use a program called Billings Pro. It allows you to, set up clients and projects and, sub projects, and it makes invoicing a lot easier because, once you've finished writing something, you mark it as done, and then you can easily make an invoice. As far as contacts, I use Google. I use Gmail. I use my Gmail contacts for that, and I do a lot of tagging. Like when I've talked to a source, I will add them to my contacts, but I'll also tag that contact with keywords. Like maybe they specialize in cancer or thyroid problems. So when I tag those, it makes it easier for me to go back and find these people. In the beginning, it doesn't matter so much, but after a while, you get so many contacts, it's really hard to keep up with people.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. So with regards to like your income, so how long you been freelancing now?
I started in 2010, so January of 2010, and I had been just teaching yoga for the 6 months before that. So I was freelancing as a yoga teacher before I became a freelance writer.
So you're coming up on about 6 years of freelancing. So
Yeah.
have you seen like the growth in the income to where where you're actually making more as a writer now than you did in your professional life before?
I don't think I make more than I did when I worked in the university, but I was working 60, 70 hour weeks there, so it was a pretty heavy duty job. My lifestyle is a little more tame here. I I live in Canada, basically in the middle of nowhere. So I spend less time working, and I make enough to survive, and it's kind of like a personal choice. We have a garden in the backyard, so we'll garden and grow a lot of our own food, and we kind of relax during the summer. So I could probably make more money if I were working the crazy hours I used to, but I like working enough to live, but not working so much that I'm stressed out.
And you're living like the writer's dream there.
For me it is. There's a lot of outdoors here, so there's a lot of hiking and kayaking, that kind of stuff here. So I think you decide what you want to do. If you live in New York, you're going to have to work a lot harder as a freelance writer. But what I can say is that I get paid more than I did in the beginning for each bit of work. In the beginning, my pay scale was kind of low per article or per project, but now it's up to the point where it's I can write fewer things and make as much money as I did in the beginning.
And do you think that's like the preferred thing, to be able to write fewer things to make more money so that you don't have to do as much?
I think for me, I like that. I like to write longer things. You don't always get to do that as a freelance writer. But I definitely like to spend more time doing something well than feeling like I'm always scrambling to churn out, like 200 word articles like every 20 minutes or something like that.
Right. Now tell us a little bit about how you set your rates, or, how that works.
It's if you write for a publication, they set the rate usually. There's some wiggle room. You can sometimes ask for more. It depends on the publication. If you've been writing for them for a while, you can always reapproach them after a year or two and say, hey, I'd like to up my rates a little bit. If you're doing stuff for businesses, I also write for businesses. I also do a little bit of website content and website design. Those rates, I kind of looked around to see what other people were charging. But I think the bottom line is I looked at, well, how long does it take me to do these things? And what do I need to charge to come up with an hourly rate that kind of works for me? And I kind of geared it toward what I used to make when I worked in the university. But there are times where people don't want to pay that. So there are some groups that I will give a little bit cheaper rates. Especially nonprofits, I will sometimes give them a little bit of a discount for my writing.
Right, right. So on the promotional side, you just talked about building websites. How important is it for a writer to have a website to present themselves?
I think at the bare minimum, you should have your portfolio online. If you contact an editor with a story idea, they'll definitely want to check out and your portfolio. And I think the easiest way to do that is put it online. But if you can get your portfolio online, it also shows that you're kind of adept at other things like websites. It seems silly that not everyone would be comfortable working on the web, but some people still aren't. Um, Portfolio you can do on your own website, or there are some sites that just do portfolios for writers. But I use WordPress, so I created my own website, and that allows me to have a blog, my portfolio, and I can also list services that I offer, like content writing for websites. And the nice thing about that is the more stuff you have on your website, the more likely people are going to find you when they're searching for something. Like if someone types in, writer Canada or writer Ontario, chances are I'll pop up somewhere near the list or near the top.
Oh, cool. Now, let me ask you about the method of kind of putting my portfolio together. So let's say like I write for 4 or 5 different magazines. What's the best method for listing my portfolio? Do I copy and paste the entire article in? Do I put a link in there? Do I put a partial summary of the article with a link? How do you recommend doing that?
If in general, I don't suggest copying the article because that gets into copyright problems. I think the best way is to link to the article if it's online. And the only time that I actually put an article online is if that publication is not online, or if it's a print publication. Sometimes I'll put the PDF of just my article there, just because generally that looks a lot better than the web version of the article. And I think it's when somebody looks at your article that looks like it's in a magazine, they have a different response than if they're just reading on the web. But most of my portfolio is just the title, the publication, and then a link to that website.
Very cool. So how else do you promote yourself?
Other than that, a lot of my work comes from word of mouth. I'll work with somebody, and this is mostly for business related work. Although I've worked with companies on health and science related stuff, and they'll pass my name on to other people. So I think if you do a good job, your name will get out there, and more people will come to you. I actually don't have business cards. Since I work remotely, it's very rare that I ever talk to anyone in person that I write with. But I will also look for jobs. Some people will post jobs on Craigslist. They're looking for a writer, and there are other freelance websites that post jobs. So I will look at those and apply for them if they seem like something that's in my area.
Okay, so you just mentioned Craigslist as a way of kind of procuring jobs. What are some of the other sites that you go to, or can you recommend some of those off the top of your head?
Give me 1 second.
Yeah,
I have them
sure thing.
in here. So there are a bunch that I use, like journalismjobs.com. Health Writer Hub is another one. It's mainly geared toward health writers, but they have some job listings. Freelance Writing Jobs is another website. Blogging Pro has a job board. Media Bistro is another one that has jobs. There's one called Morning Coffee. I think it's on Freelance Writing Jobs website. They send out an email every day with new job offerings, mostly for freelance writers. Some are like regular paid gigs. And I also get job listings through some of the professional societies that I'm a member of.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a second. The professional societies. One, tell us which ones you're a part of, and then two, tell us, I guess, is there value in being a part of it?
So I'm currently a member of the Association of Healthcare Journalists and the Society of Professional Journalists. I also follow the National Association of Science Writers listserv. I'm not a member of that, but I do read their listserv, and there's a lot of good tips on that. I joined the Healthcare Journalist Society mainly for the benefits, and one of those is access to scientific textbooks and publications, which is really hard when you're not associated with a university. So that's one of the things they offer. But they also have a listserv, and they have a lot of other resources on how to freelance, how to write quality health articles. And the Society of Professional Journalism, they have a lot of articles on, hardcore journalism. And I never trained in journalism. I was a science writer because I know science. So it's nice to have that, that kind of journalism angle. And just I'm always learning something new from that.
Super. Thanks so much for sharing those. Now, are there any like unspoken rules about, just kind of the writing process or the submission process that we should know? Like, do editors like a certain type of pitch? Do they prefer a fresh pitch as opposed to maybe a reprint of something that you've already done in the past? That sort of thing.
As with most of the stuff, I think it varies. There are, if you look online, you may find some interviews with editors, and they'll say, "This is what I like," and 9 times out of 10, they all want different stuff. So it makes it difficult. But I think if you look at the publication, you'll know what they're looking for. You'll know if they want fresh stuff. A lot of local magazines, like very local ones, they'll take your reprint. So if you've written a story for an online publication and you still retain the rights, you can easily sell those to local publications. So either the reprint as is, or the concept with maybe a couple of local sources thrown in there. So I would suggest looking at the publication, and once you look through there, you'll have a sense of what they really want.
Now, you just mentioned something pretty interesting about, I guess, the rights of the story. Typically, who owns those?
That varies as well. If you're writing for an online website only, most of the time they want those rights, so they'll do what's called work for hire. Just because, if you write something for a print publication, it appears once and then it's gone. Sometimes they'll have it online, but if a website is completely online, that is their content, and they don't want you, kind of watering down their content by reusing other places. I do both. I have some jobs where I do work for hire. Others are, I retain the rights after it goes live in that publication. So what they call North American first rights or something like that. I think you may be able to negotiate your contract to get the rights after they put it online. So I think it varies. More people, I think, are trying to get work for hire, so they retain the rights forever.
Okay, so would that be something like, when I do a pitch, would that be something I need to express in my pitch that, the publication gets one-time rights, or?
I would wait until they accept the pitch. What they'll do is send you a contract usually. Some publications never do that. So you're just kind of working loosely. But when they send you the contract, that's the time to, look at it and make changes. You can request that you get the rights after they've published it. Sometimes they'll agree to, letting you have the rights a year later, so they get some traction out of it first. And there are other things you can look at changing your contract. There are some liability things that creep in that you may be uncomfortable with. So it's always good to read the contract and then kind of, ask for changes if there's anything that you don't like.
All right. Now, you mentioned something earlier that I want to go back to that I thought was kind of funny. You mentioned about not wanting to upset an editor. You have any experience with that? Do you have a story you want to share?
I've never upset an editor that I know of. There might be. I try to make an editor's job easier, and I've heard some horror stories about people will just keep pestering an editor, and they've admitted that if you do that, if you just keep annoying them, your name will likely just go into the trash can, and that'll be it for you at that publication. So I think, if you go into this and you think, well, how can I make the editor's job easier? I think you're going to have a lot better experience. I've never been yelled at by an editor. And, when I've, dropped the ball, which I try not to do very often, like maybe I forgot to call a source or something like that, and I have to call my editor and say, I need an extra, day to finish the story. they've said yes because we have this good working relationship already. If you have a bad working relationship and you ask for extra time, they're just going to roll their eyes and kind of forget about you soon.
Now, you talked about making an editor's job easier. I'm all about that.
Yeah.
What are some tips that you have for writers that can make an editor's job easier?
I think it starts with the query. Think of how many queries that an editor gets at, like a major publication. Most publications will read all the queries, and if you're sending in a query that's just kind of garbage, you've just taken time away from them, and they're going to associate your name with kind of a poorly written query. If you do that, it doesn't mean that's your last chance. You can always redeem yourself with a better query next time. So if you write the best query you can, be as specific as you can. When they send you a contract, respond promptly, and don't get angry when the editor doesn't respond promptly. I've been going back and forth for 6 months now with an online website. They wanted me to write for them, and then things changed, and they're not sure if they wanted me to write, and they're like, well, we're going to have to wait a few months. And every time she came back to me, she apologized for not responding quickly enough. If I'd gotten angry at her and said, why didn't you call me back? I think that would have changed our relationship a little bit. And then, when you write your story, turn it on time, get it as close to the word count as possible. And make sure your story is exactly what the editor had discussed. If the editor says, I want this angle for your story, make sure you do that angle for the story. If you think it's not going to work, talk to them beforehand rather than after you've written it. And sometimes when they send you changes to do, or they have questions after you've turned in the story, again, respond as quickly as you can. And they're on deadline. Chances are they have a lot more work than you do. And I know as freelance writers, we feel like we're always overwhelmed. I think editors are usually even more overwhelmed than we are. So just kind of try not to be a pain along the way.
I can appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. Hopefully that's worked out so far with you.
It definitely has. All right. Now, you're also a yoga instructor.
Yes.
Now, talk about that a little bit. Like, how does having that balance you out as a writer?
I think, that was really good. When I moved to Canada, I didn't have a visa. I actually didn't get that for 3 years, so I wasn't allowed to work here. So the only work I could do was online because it was through the U.S. So I had been teaching yoga for, a couple years and writing. And then when I got here and all I was doing was writing, I noticed immediately because all of a sudden I went from, half the day I was moving, I was teaching yoga, I was actually doing yoga a lot more, to just standing in front of my computer all day. And, that's hard to just be stuck in front of the computer all day long. So I think yoga is something that balances me out. I get up every morning, I do yoga, but I'll also do it during the day, like little bits here and there, just to kind of break the stress, or, sometimes I just can't write anymore and I just do like 5 or 10 minutes. But it also gives me a good understanding of, the challenges that people face, when they're starting an exercise program or eating healthy, because, a lot of the stuff I deal with my yoga students are things that I write about. So, eating well, exercising, de-stressing yourself. So I have a lot of experience, like kind of hands-on experience with that.
Good. Yeah, I definitely agree. I think just, having something away from writing definitely helps you to stay balanced.
Yeah. When I worked at the universities, sometimes I would opt for a longer day and take a walk in the middle of the day just because I couldn't sit at my desk all day long. I just, I'd say, well, I'm going to go take a walk, and then just go up in the woods for an hour or so and come back. And, that sort of thing, you just feel refreshed and you're like, okay, now I can focus.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I do the same thing. I use a Pomodoro timer, and that's kind of how I stop myself.
Nice.
Every 25 minutes, I'll stop myself, kind of look out the window, readjust my eyes, stretch, and then kind of get back into it. But yeah, it having to sit and work does take its toll on you.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, so let's come in for a landing. But before we do that, let me ask one last question because I don't want to let this one go by, because I know that people want to know about how many stories a month are you writing at this point?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say I'm counting in my head. I probably write at least 2 or 3 stories a week, um, just for publications. Um, but on top of that, I also write articles for like ghostwrite articles for health websites, and those will come in batches. So I'll usually get like 5 of those a week, um, and they take anywhere from an hour to 2 hours to write each. So it can be some weeks I'm writing like 8 to 12 articles. Some weeks I'm writing like 2 or 3 only. So it varies a lot. It's up and down. Um, but that's I think that's mostly my flow right now.
Okay, cool, cool. Thanks. All right, so we're gonna come in for a landing. We're just gonna, pick your brain a little bit, ask a few fun questions, and then we'll close out. Ready?
Okay, sounds good.
All right. So, which author or writers do you admire most?
Um, that's a very fiction or
Oh,
nonfiction.
it can be either one.
Yeah. For nonfiction, I read a lot of Joseph Campbell. It's mythology. Um, as far as science related stuff, I'm not sure I could name any authors for science related stuff. I do read like New York Times science section, Discover magazine, Scientific American. So a lot of those are, actual scientists writing those, and those are some that I like. As far as fiction goes, Hemingway, Faulkner, I read a lot of that older stuff too, but I also read some like Raymond Carver short story stuff.
Okay, very cool. If you could have one imaginary life for a day, what would you do?
Other than living the writer's dream that I have
Other
right
other
now.
than the
Yeah,
writer's dream in
yeah,
Ontario, what would you be doing right now
yeah.
in an imaginary life?
I've always wanted to just go find an island where there's almost nobody on it and just kind of live there for a month. Can I do a month, not just a day?
Yeah, you can do an entire month. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Um, that's always been my kind of thing, just, getting away from the world a little bit.
Yeah. So, what would be the one thing you took with you to the island?
Probably my notebook. I always, wherever I go, I always have a writing notebook. So that's it's something that if that's all I had, that I'd be happy.
Awesome. What is your go-to book for writing or inspiration?
Um, that's a good question. I read a lot of writing books. I'm not sure if there's one specific one that I have. As far as I think Julia Cameron has some good writing books, kind of like teaching you to write in the flow. She wrote The Artist's Way, Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott. That was a nice one. As far as style guides go, I have the Chicago Manual of Style sitting at my desk all the time, waiting to tell me where the period should go. So,
and
not
the
sure that's inspiration or just
and the comma, right? The extra, the
yeah,
Oxford comma.
yeah. That's an ongoing going battle in my own head.
I know. Oh man, yeah, I get a lot of that where someone will send it and I'll as an editor I'll have to strike it out because I use AP and they're like, hey, you took the
Yeah,
comma
yeah,
out. I'm like, it's AP, man.
yeah. I
It
think
becomes a casualty, huh?
it does. I think it took me a while, and you struck out quite a few of mine. I think in the beginning, um, you kind of have to switch between this is what you're writing for the web, and then this is what you're writing for your own stuff. Uh,
Yeah, it's so
switch.
true. I went to an American Copy Editors Society conference in New York about a year and a half ago. And they said, I guess there are still, like, I think 3 newspapers in the U.S. that use Chicago.
Hmm.
I was completely shocked. I didn't think any papers, use Chicago style, but they do.
That's I should read those instead.
Yeah, I think one of them was like, I think the Philadelphia Inquirer was one of them, and I can't remember the other two.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'll have to check those out. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Share one piece of parting writing advice that you can give our listeners.
Hmm. You know, I think don't stress about it is probably the biggest thing I can say. Things will come together if you just kind of like find time to recharge yourself, and you'll have a better sense of where you want to go if you're not like hunkered down like 8 to 15 hours a day just writing. So I think taking time to de-stress will give you a little bit of space to kind of think through things, and you'll make better decisions about where you want to live, what type of stuff you want to write. It also gives you a better sense of, are you writing well? So I think that kind of relaxed approach to writing is probably a good way to go.
All right. And then how can our listeners connect with you?
I think probably the easiest way is to, you can find me at my website, ShawnRadcliffe.com. I'm also on Twitter, Shawn Radcliffe, one word. You should be able to find me. Or if you just Google my name, I usually pop up somewhere near the top of the search results.
Awesome. Well, hey, thanks for joining me today. Shawn, you packed a lot into 40 minutes.
Oh, great. Thanks for
That was awesome. Yeah. Cool. Thanks so much. Wow. What an inspiring episode. If you weren't able to take notes, I've got you covered. Visit my website at www.chrisjonesinc.com/podcast to get today's show notes, as well as access other episodes you may have missed. Be sure to subscribe and rate the podcast on iTunes. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time.